Good morning, everyone. Good morning, UTLA family, parents, and community members. We connect again at a rough time. The US is breaking new infection records every day and averaging more than one COVID-19 death every minute. Governor Newsom has imposed a new curfew starting tomorrow. New York City schools were forced to close down again this week to protect the health and safety of students and staff. Here in LA, our schools have been spared the terrible yo-yo effect of closing and opening and closing again. But this deadly virus surge is heartbreaking. It's not where we want it to be right now. We want it to be moving closer to being able to be back safely with our students, not moving farther away. But here's what we do know. The decisions we make now can save lives. Looking back, it's clear that our actions in the early stages of this pandemic to stay home helped flatten the spread and literally saved lives. We can do it again. Our holidays must look different this year. My family's Thanksgiving is usually spent with my friend and her family, but not this year. And it was tough to come to terms with that, and a tough conversation to have with my son Giovanni, who aches to be with family and friends, especially around the holiday season. But he gets it. We stay apart in 2020 so we can be together in 2021. And I'll make his favorite homemade mac and cheese this year. We have to deal with the real. That's what State Schools Chief Tony Thurmond said this week. Ideally, the best place for kids is in school. That's the ideal. But Thurmond said that we shouldn't just forge ahead without regard to safety, just because we know what our ideal is. We have to deal with the real. And the real is that a physical return to schools is not imminent. We are in bargaining with LAUSD on what an eventual return looks like, but we are not negotiating a specific date or timeline to return. With COVID cases surging, no one is pressing on the gas pedal right now. Instead, we are putting together a plan for what an eventual return would look like. Think about it like developing a plan and then putting it into a big box, and we don't open that box until it's safe. In determining when it is safe, we will be guided, as always, by science. This week, more than 700 chapter leaders from across the city participated in a UTLA webinar to discuss community health metrics that need to be reached for a physical return to schools. Chapters held meetings this week so that colleagues can discuss together the metrics and overall bargaining. We encourage you to watch the UTLA webinar or review the PowerPoint for specifics on the science-based community health metrics for a safe return and necessary elements of a bargaining agreement for a potential physical return. There's a lot of good detailed information in there. I hope you will check it out. We'll put the links in the chat below. I have to give it up to our chapter leaders who came to the webinar ready to advocate for the health and safety of all of you and your students. Chapter leaders literally asked almost 100 questions, which were answered live and in the chat. Two of the top topics were what a hybrid schedule could look like, and if there would be accommodations for educators with underlying health conditions. So let's talk a bit about those two issues. As far as a hybrid schedule, That is on the front burner in bargaining. We are prioritizing reaching an agreement on a hybrid schedule first, because after that, other issues will need to be negotiated and layered onto the schedule. For example, special education services, HHS, early education, adult education, and itinerants. A potential physical return would have to use a hybrid schedule, and frankly, there is no such thing as a good hybrid schedule. However, we are pushing for no roving teachers, no roving students, no in-person and remote teaching at the same time. Isolated cohorts of students who don't interact with other cohorts. No AM/PM cohort rotation for elementary schools, and minimal master schedule changes to the greatest degree possible. As for educators with underlying health conditions, the district has committed to accommodate educators with identified health risk who need to stay remote. But we also know that many of us have at-risk people in our households. The district has stated their intent to try to accommodate older educators or those with family members who have identified health risk. However, their ability to do this would be largely determined by how many families choose to stay remote. Ultimately, the number of educators wanting to stay remote is greater than what is needed to teach students who stay remote, then some educators may be required to physically return. LAUSD is surveying families right now to gauge how many students would likely move to in-person learning under a hybrid model once available, and how many would opt to stay fully with distance learning. UTLA members will also be surveyed. Having an idea of numbers is an important piece in the puzzle for bargaining and planning. We encourage everyone to complete the survey. Even with the virus surging, political pressure is mounting to open schools. We need to be real here. Elected leaders have not done what is needed to bring the virus under control, which means students and educators cannot safely return to school anytime soon. The challenge is for society and our elected leaders to provide the funding and do the right things for policy points of view to make it safe. There are no shortcuts. As a society, the priority should be the educational and health needs of school-age children, especially our highest needs students. Instead, we see card rooms, bars, brew pubs, mini golf, hair salons, museums, racetracks, tattoo parlors allowed to reopen in LA County, even as schools remain closed. It's beyond frustrating when AstroTurf groups like Speak Up, funded by billionaire privatizers, try to use the crisis to divide teachers and parents. When elected officials, media, and privatization organizations ask, when are you going to open the school? We need to turn around and ask them, when are you going to make it safe for our students? So now we have to talk about testing. Now more than ever, teaching time is precious, and we are losing instructional time because of LAUSD's irrational testing scheme. The district assessment mandates are straight up ridiculous, and they are out of control and out of touch with this in the time of COVID. We are exploring contractual and legal options, member fight back tactics, and parent engagement to push back. Please stay tuned. We will have more on this very soon. I know we have some early ed folks who join us every Friday. So let's give it up for our EECs and CSPP folks. We see you and we celebrate you. The work you do with our youngest learners is foundational and sets them on the path to continued success. And in support of how critical your programs are, we are really close to reaching an agreement with LAUSD for providing voluntary in-person early education center services. The agreement will be similar to the ones we've reached for voluntary DIS services, student assessments, one-on-one tutoring, small group tutoring, adult ed, CTE instruction, physical conditioning for team sports, and nurses working in the COVID testing program. Bargaining these agreements has been important to ensure clear safety procedures for all volunteers and protect the right to decline or withdraw from participation without reprisals. Some administrators don't seem to understand the word voluntary. Please make the decision that's right for you and resist any undue pressure to volunteer. Our side agreement backs you up. Under our agreement with the district, any in-person services provided by UTLA members are strictly voluntary. And now to the other end of the educational spectrum. We move from our early childhood educators to our awesome adult education teachers. Under our pandemic reality, adult ed educators continue to deliver life-changing instruction, including ESL and citizenship classes, high school diploma and equivalency classes, and a truly vast array of occupational programs from auto repair and carpentry to medical technology and aviation repair. If you ever want to understand the power of adult education to offer second chances in some of the most underserved, vulnerable communities, speak to an LAUSD adult education student. And most of our adult ed educators do this amazing work with little to no job security or consistency in hours and assignments. For years, the district has been keeping adult ed teachers from earning permanent status, and their teaching schedule can change year to year, depending on the whims of management. 1 year, an instructor could have a full load of classes, the next year, only 10 hours. Our adult education UTLA community has been organizing to change this for years. Now, there is a positive development. This week, LAUSD school board member Jackie Goldberg introduced a motion that would require LAUSD to stop denying tenure-like protections and offer permanent status to longtime adult educators. The vote on the motion happens next month. Kudos to our adult ed leaders, teachers, and students who have fought long and hard for this. So now on to some shout outs to our community of educators. Remember, share your good news with me through my executive assistant, Evie Vaughn, at evauhn@utla.net. I'd love to mention your name or your school next time. Teachers can be humble people. And if there's a colleague of yours doing something super cool, let me know. UTLA East area held its first ever happy hour last Friday to de-stress and motivate each other. We love our UTLA area meetings and our UTLA chapter meetings, but it's great to connect with each other in a more casual spirit. Way to go, East area. When schools first shut down last March, Emerson Middle School English teacher Noriko Nakata, my friend and former colleague, talked early on with her 8th graders about self-care. Now those kids are in high school, and Noriko is promoting self-care with a new crop of 8th graders. Her guidance works for students and us teachers too. The ideas may sound straightforward, but I ask you to check in with yourself. How many of these are you doing? Okay. Here's her ways to take care of your mental health in uncertain times. Be kind to yourself and others. Breathe. Continue to set your alarm clock and create a schedule for your day. Talk with family about a house schedule for you to get things done. Get up, shower, and get dressed as if you were going out. Start a time to do schoolwork, learn, complete homework, and read. Limit your screen time, news consumption, and streaming of media. Check in with friends. Set up group chats and FaceTime calls. Get exercise. Walk. Shoot some hoops or head to the park and play. Get sleep. And the final one really resonates with me. Remember what it is that you can control. I would add, and learn when to let go. Last night, a little history flew over our heads when the International Space Station passed over Los Angeles, piloted by Victor Glover. Victor Glover is the first Black crew member ever on the International Space Station. Next year, he could be followed by Jeanette Epps, who would be the first Black woman to be part of the space station crew. Kudos to these pioneers. We'll put links to Glover's bio and live space station tracking maps in the chat below. And I'm going to share 2 resources that crossed my virtual desk this week. One of them is an anti-racism resource guide that Google employee Janae Butler created in the wake of George Floyd's death. As an underrepresented woman of color in the tech world, Janae knew that Floyd's death and related protests would spark uncomfortable conversations at work, and she wanted to help educate her Google colleagues and foster greater allyship. We'll put a link to her work in the chat below. And if during the break next week, you're looking to devote some time to reading, no, actual reading, Color Lines has put together a list of 30 books with stories of love, survival, and activism. And I personally can't wait to continue reading Unapologetic by Charlene Carruthers. This is a 21st century activist guide to upending mainstream ideas about race, class, and gender, carves out a path to collective liberation, and we'll put the link in the chat below. So now I close with how I began. Stay safe these holidays. We are tired. We are frustrated. And many days we are stressed beyond capacity. We need our extended families and friends more than ever right now to lighten our emotional load. But we cannot have holidays as usual this year without putting lives at risk. I hope next week's long break is a time for you to rest, recharge, and reconnect with your essential spirit. You deserve every moment of peace that you can find. We won't be doing Facebook Live next week because of the break, but I'll catch you all when we return. Stay safe. Stay UTLA strong, because together we rise.